Hey guys, it's Brian. We're back in the garage with the Frostbite JL, and today we're putting in a new rear drive shaft. Let's go take a look. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and take a look at the drive shaft we got. So we did go with an Adams drive shaft, and this one's going to be a 1350 extreme duty drive shaft for you. This one's specifically for the JL. We did measure it, and they did make it specifically for our vehicle. So if you guys come and take a look, this one does have the double cardan joint up at the transfer case. So what this does is it eliminates vibration by having the two U-joints there. It'll kind of counteract each other, so you can get away with having a little steeper drive line angles, not perfectly lined up, and that'll help with vibrations. This one is quite beefy. I do have the 1310 on the front, and this one's definitely bigger. And then this one will have a 1350 down at the axle side. So that one does go ahead and require you to change the pinion flange down at the axle. We'll show you how to do that here in a minute. But this one uses these little U-bolts that'll kind of clamp around the bearings on the caps here, and that'll tighten it to your axle. So we do need to replace the factory flat style one. And then it does come with the transfer case replacement one. This one is pretty easy. You just go ahead and pull your other one off with a puller and then put this guy on. We did that on my front shaft as well. So you're gonna need 14 millimeter for the U-bolts, and then you're gonna need 5/8 for the transfer case side. And then another thing that you might not have is 1 1/4 inch for the big nuts on the transfer case and on the axle pinion flange. So you do want to make sure you have one of those. Okay guys, and one more thing to note is you do need a Torx 50 bit for getting the factory bolts out of the flanges. So that and this 1 1/4 inch are kind of odd stuff. So I'll put links down below where you can buy this. A couple other things to keep in mind. Having a puller, something easy like this, will make getting the stock flanges off a lot easier. And then for the axle side, you do want to go ahead and get an inch-pound, either a beam one like this or one with a dial. The dial ones are quite expensive. This one was only about 30-40 bucks. So you do want to go ahead and check your torque on that rear pinion nut as you're rotating it. You want to make sure that nut gets back to that same factory spec torque. So we'll go ahead and show you how to do that as well. But I'm pretty excited about getting this in the rear. I did kind of tear up my factory one last time we went on a double black diamond trail, so it definitely needed to be replaced. So this is a good option. Let's go ahead and get in the Jeep. Okay, so we're underneath the Jeep now. This is our factory drive shaft, and you can probably tell I've ripped the boot on this. I've also put a pretty big dent on this side. I'll show you that later. But I've also really bent this flange down here at the axle, and I'm getting lots of crazy vibrations over 45 miles an hour. We did get this in some rocks last time we went out, so we definitely want to replace it. The new drive shaft is smaller in diameter, so we'll have more clearance, and it's also smaller down here at the axle, so that'll buy us some more clearance as well. So let's go ahead and we'll get this factory one out, and then we'll show you how to install the new one. And what we're going to start with is up here at the transfer case. These are going to be those T50s we were talking about. We're going to go ahead and start loosening those up. We can drop this down and then we'll disconnect it at the axle. Okay, so now that we got this side loose, what we're going to do is hop up in the Jeep and we're going to pop the transfer case in neutral. We're going to spin this around 180 degrees and we'll get the other side. Okay guys, so one thing to note, if you do have the Dana 44 in the back with the limited slip, I did have to go ahead and jack up one wheel while the transfer case was in neutral, just to give the drive shaft a spin, because it was locking up back there. But just jack the one wheel up, make sure you chock your wheels real good. Now we can get the rest of these bolts, and then we'll pull it off at the axle side. All right, here we go. All right guys, you can see where I've gotten into the rocks quite a bit on this part of the axle. So it'll be nice to go ahead and get this replaced with the new flange and the smaller diameter axle or drive shaft. But it does look like I've chewed these up. Not too bad that I can't get them out. But I'm going to go ahead and start pulling these out, and then we'll get this old drive shaft out. Okay guys, so before you pull this factory rear pinion flange, you want to go ahead and check for the inch-pounds resistance while it's spinning freely. It's very important that you get this nut back on at the same spec. That way you're not over crushing the bearings and the crush sleeve that's in there. So when they set up these gears, there's a crush sleeve, and they torque these down to spec, and it crushes that sleeve. If we go ahead and tighten that, it will actually wear out your bearings early. So that's why you want to go ahead and pick up one of these. I'll put a link for it down below. Like I said, it wasn't very expensive. And then you want to keep an eye on what the readings are. Write it down, make sure you get it back to that. Okay guys, so mine was reading right around 50 inch-pounds. That seems pretty close to what it should be. Other people that I've seen do this were right around 40, so that should be pretty accurate. We want to make sure we get it back to that 50 and no tighter. Maybe a tiny bit tighter, but we definitely don't want to crush that sleeve. So let's go ahead and we'll paint mark this, and we'll pull this and the transfer case flange off, get the new ones on. All right, here we go. All right, and just like that, that nut's off. So now we're going to go ahead and get our puller and pull this flange off. Okay guys, so we got that puller that I picked up from Amazon. I'll put a link for this down below. I like this one because it's adjustable. You don't have to buy 3 different sizes. You can slide it in or out on this T-beam. So it's got multiple use cases and takes up less room. Let's go ahead and get this off with a 14 millimeter. And just like that, this is off. So one thing to note on the factory one, it does have this O-ring in there. They don't want you to reuse that on the new pinion flange or the new transfer case flange you're going to put in. So make sure you don't transfer that over. So let's go ahead and we'll grab the new one, we'll run that in, and then we'll pull off the other flange. All right, so now we've got the transfer case flange that comes from Adams. One thing to note is you do want to go ahead and lube this so we don't rip up the seal when we slide it in initially. I am going to use this motor assembly grease. This is pretty cheap and it works really good for that. You can also use ATF. Then we're also going to grab our 5/8 bolts. We'll go back under the Jeep and get this back on for you. And that little bit of lube should keep that from tearing that seal at the transfer case. We're also going to grab some red Loctite and some RTV for the nut for the transfer case. We'll put that on there just so we don't have any leaks and so that bolt stays nice and tight, and then we'll get this installed. Alright, so once we went ahead and put that on, we're going to go ahead and put some red Loctite on this nut now, since we're ready to install that new flange. The reason we did this is so we keep any leaks out. That factory one did have that big rubber O-ring. This is basically replacing that. So let's go ahead and we'll get that Loctite on. We'll go throw her on real quick. You do want to take your torque wrench under there. This one is going to get torqued to 166 foot-pounds. Alright, here we go. So now we're going to go ahead and we'll slide that new flange on here at the transfer case. There we go. And then we got our Loctite and RTV nut. Alright, that's what that new flange looks like. Let's go ahead and get it torqued to 166 foot-pounds, and then we can go ahead and do the axle side. Alright guys, so we did have to step it up with the torque wrench. We went with the big M18 Milwaukee. Definitely recommend this. I did have to try for a while with my other one and a breaker bar. Didn't work. This guy zipped this guy right off though. And then I also did pick up this little flange holder here. This is from Bleepin' Jeep. You probably watch his YouTube channels. But this one's pretty cool. You just use the factory bolts, bolt it back on the pinion, and you can hold it with a breaker bar. That way you're not slapping gears while you're impacting. Alright guys, so now that we went ahead and got that nut off, let's go ahead and pull the factory flange, and then we'll put our new Adams 1350 flange on. Alright, here we go. Okay, and just like that, we got that stock pinion flange off. As you can see, I have hit this pretty hard, and it was causing quite a bit of noise and vibration. So let's go ahead and get the new Adams pinion flange. Now that we got the stock pinion flange off, we're going to go ahead and get the Adams drive shaft one ready. So this one, we're going to have to go ahead and put that assembly lube on again on the outside here, just so we don't rip our seal. And then we're also on the nut, we're going to go ahead and do the black RTV and then a bunch of red Loctite again. So let's go ahead and get this ready. Okay, so now we went ahead and put that red Loctite on. We got our black RTV. We got this greased up, so let's go ahead and go throw this on the Jeep. Okay guys, now that we're back at the axle, what we're going to do is go ahead and put our 1350 pinion flange on. All right, get this guy on right here. We're gonna give it a couple love taps to get it in there. All right, now that we got that tapped on there, we can go ahead and get our nut back on. One thing to note with this nut, you do not want to over tighten it on the pinion there. What you can do is you can go ahead and crush the bearing crush sleeve in there even more, and that'll wear out your bearings. So you want to make sure you get this just tight enough that we don't have any play. Try to get it back where it was. We're going to check with the inch-pound torque wrench and make sure that it's still in that range. We do not want to over tighten this. So let's go ahead and we'll get this back on, and then we'll go ahead and throw the drive shaft in. Alright guys, I went ahead and checked it again with the inch-pound torque wrench. We're still right around 40 or 50 inch-pounds for rotational torque. So I think we're good. Did put a lot of Loctite on that. We did go ahead and seal it up as well. So let's go ahead and we'll throw the new drive shaft in. Okay guys, now that we have both our pinion flange and our transfer case flange installed, it's time to get the drive shaft in. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the larger bolts and go ahead and get the transfer case installed. So these ones are going to be 5/8. Factory's around 90 foot-pounds. We're going to get them as tight as we can. Do want to use a lot of red Loctite. It's hard to get a torque wrench up in there, so we're just going to get them nice and tight. They do come with little lock washers as well. And then we'll go ahead and connect the axle side. Alright guys, so now that we gone ahead and snugged up all these 5/8 bolts, what we're going to do is we'll double up a couple wrenches, and we're going to get these guys as tight as we can. You will need to hop up, pop your transfer case in neutral, rotate the surround so you can get to the top two better. But once those are good and snug, we should be all set to go ahead and bolt it to the axle. Okay guys, now that we got the transfer case all buttoned up, we're going to go ahead and connect it at the axle end. So what you do is you go ahead and you grab the new U-bolt style attachments here that Adams provides. So this is going to use a 14mm. It's going to be a lock washer and a bolt. What we do need to do is get the tape off our 1350 U-joint, and then we can go ahead and line it up here and we can start snugging it down. Important thing with these is you want to snug them down even, just like any U-bolt, and you also don't want to over torque them because you will crush your bearing caps. So let's go ahead and get this installed and then we'll be all done. Alright, so that's about what it'll look like. Don't forget to put your red Loctite on these again. We're going to go ahead and tighten these down and then we're all done.
Alright, so now that we have the drive shaft in the Jeep, I want to go over a few of the things that I needed to get for the install. So one of them being the Milwaukee Impact. I did go ahead and get their high torque one. This is their 1/2 inch. I think this impact is great. The one I was using actually wasn't able to break that nut loose and get it off. We even tried with breaker bars, we couldn't get it off. This guy popped it right off. So if you guys are doing jobs similar to this and you don't have pneumatic tools, you might want to go ahead and pick up something like this. It makes it a lot easier. Another thing, that nut, we didn't quite get it tight all the way when we first put it on. We actually had the threads about flush with the nut, and I did have some noise. I did reach out to Adams, and they were nice enough to call me even on a Sunday. The owner called me and walked through all the stuff and helped me diagnose that that nut was not tight enough. So this guy, we went ahead and threw it back on there. We were able to run it all the way back in. Now we have about 1/4 inch of threads coming out. There's no play in the pinion at all. We have our backlash still. So we went ahead and checked it with the inch-pound torque wrench. We still have about the same preload as before, and it feels great. So it's all set. So it definitely needed this impact. It definitely made the job easier. Also, I did buy this Leap and Jeep pinion flange. This thing is pretty nice. This is a pinion flange adapter. This kind of goes right on there. Works with the 1350 and the factory round one as well. And then you can put a breaker bar in here or a solid metal pipe. Helps you hold the pinion flange still, and then that way you're able to break that nut off without cranking on your gear set. So definitely need that. You also do need the big 1¼ inch socket, and then you do need a puller of some kind. These are all off Amazon. I'll go ahead and put links for all these tools I used. That way you guys can pick them up if you're planning on doing this job. Alright guys, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Okay guys, we're all done with the Adams drive shaft install on the rear of my Jeep. We went ahead and installed the 1350 Extreme Duty drive shaft from Adams. It's got the CV on there as well, which will help with vibrations. It is a pretty beefy drive shaft. It's quite a bit bigger than my 1310 in the front. I've had that in there for a couple of years and had no issues. So these are great drive shafts. This will actually be the 4th one that I've owned.
and I plan on getting more. They do have awesome customer service. The owner actually called me on a Sunday to go over the problem I was having with the noise in the rear, so that was great as well. Guys, go ahead and like and subscribe, follow along. Go ahead and comment down below and let me know what kind of drive shaft you're running and how you like it. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.